another episode of the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malamud here with Zach Malamud. Zach, what's going on?
Not much. We're right in the middle of fantasy draft season. I had one on Sunday. It went very well, and excited for some more coming up.
Yeah, and we got a lot of coverage in the last week as well. And we got some football coming up this week, which is pretty great. The Jets taking on the Browns tomorrow night in the Hall of Fame game. And so that should be a good one. And, we'll get some backups, but it'll at least give us some game analysis that we can get to.
Yeah, definitely. Very excited to get into preseason as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of news that came out in the last week in training camp. We're going to go through some of those, and then we're going to, later in the show, give you guys some tips on some redraft strategies. Zach and I have some tips for you guys to remember as you guys head into your redraft season. But we start with the big news, of course, and that's Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor came into this training camp, and, there were some rumors about injury and whether he was having back pain or things like that. They put him on the PUP list, and then all of a sudden, all hell kind of broke loose last week. Jim Irsay, 1 week ago today, he tweeted out, I'm going to put it out right here, NFL running back situation. We have negotiated a CBA that took years of effort and hard work and compromise in good faith by both sides to say now that a specific player category wants another negotiation after the fact is inappropriate. Some agents are selling bad faith. That, of course, comes after the Saquon Barkley incident. Josh Jacobs as well. Saquon ends up signing for a 1-year deal. He made a couple $1 million up off of the franchise tag. Josh Jacobs still sitting out, and we'll talk about that as we get closer and, what that might mean for a fantasy perspective in terms of draft stock and all of that. But it seems that all of the running backs decided that they were going to meet together as a group, come to a strategy of how they were going to move forward. Obviously, some more notable guys there. Christian McCaffrey was part of that. Jonathan Taylor as well. Some of the more outspoken guys. Jonathan Taylor was pretty vocal on social media as well. And then, of course, after that Jim Irsay tweet comes out, we then learn that, Jonathan Taylor requested a trade. His agent quote tweeted that, wrote, "Bad faith is not paying your top offensive player." And so now it kind of came out with the fact of, is Jonathan Taylor going to be on the Indianapolis Colts? And then, of course, after that, we get news that they're trying to almost put him on the NFI list, the non-football injury list, which would allow them to not even have to pay him. Obviously, it came out after that, Jonathan Taylor saying, "I didn't have any back pain at all. I'm not sure where these reports are coming from. Get some news sources." And then, of course, over the weekend, we get another quote from Jim Irsay. And here, let's see if I could pull up this quote here as I slide us over here. "If I die tonight and Jonathan Taylor is out of the league, no one's going to miss us. The league goes on. It doesn't matter who comes and who goes, and it's a privilege to be a part of it." So that one came on Saturday as Irsay met with the media. Zach, just take us through, A, what your reaction is to this entire situation, but B, what this might mean for Jonathan Taylor from a fantasy football perspective.
Yeah, and it's a frustrating situation, definitely, for people who have drafted already and grabbed Jonathan Taylor in their drafts. Of course, the NFL going through this change of not wanting to pay running backs, and running backs very unhappy right now that they're not getting the money that they feel they deserve. Obviously, that's kind of been part of the running back position over the last couple of years. And although running backs don't like it, that's how league owners and league general managers are kind of going through it. I think Jim Irsay saying a lot of this stuff is very obviously hurtful to a guy like Jonathan Taylor, who's the number one player on this offense. We talked about it. He's that number one guy. He should be the face of the franchise for the next 10 years or so. However, because he's a running back and because the league owners and GMs don't feel that running backs are worthy of getting that kind of money, he may not get that money from the Indianapolis Colts, although we feel that he definitely should be getting that money as one of the top running backs in all of football. It definitely frustrates these guys, these running backs, and as well as some of the owners. But now we look from a fantasy football perspective, and that's even more frustrating because you don't know what to do with a guy like Jonathan Taylor. Same thing that you didn't know what to do while Saquon Barkley didn't sign a contract. Josh Jacobs is still not at camp, has not signed his franchise tag with the Las Vegas Raiders. But now you look at Jonathan Taylor, and he may not be there. He may be there. There's still a ton of question marks. The best thing I would say right now, he ranks right now in ESPN's ranking 6. They still have him 6th among running backs, and he's 11th overall going in drafts. I would not feel comfortable taking him in the first round. I think that's probably what you have to go into your draft saying, probably not going to go and take a shot on Jonathan Taylor in the first round. I think the earliest I would take him would be probably mid to late second round. I think that's a good spot. Obviously, if you get Jonathan Taylor and then he goes into camp and he's starting on the team, and then you get an absolute steal. But if I'm drafting right now, we have a draft coming up. I have the 5th pick. I'm probably not taking Jonathan Taylor with that 5th pick in the second round. I think it would be the 6th pick in the second round. I'm just not taking that. I really cannot find a way that it'll urge me to take Jonathan Taylor with all these question marks going on, as well as it is super early right now. We have a really early redraft. I don't want to take that chance, especially if injuries can pop up. I don't want to be the guy to take Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, it's valid. Listen, I have the first pick in this draft, and I was actually thinking about, do I take him with the last pick of the second round and the potential that he falls there? Because I think that there is the potential that he would be there at the end of that second round now, especially with what's coming out here. Listen, he's 24. So from a dynasty football perspective, as we talk redraft and dynasty on this podcast, from dynasty, he's 24. Somebody's going to pay him. Someone's going to trade for him. The O-line was a struggle from Indianapolis. So my suggestion is, if you have Jonathan Taylor, hold him right now, just to kind of see what's going on. Because, of course, if he is on the Colts, he's still Jonathan Taylor and he'll be fine. But in the case that he ends up going to another team, listen, there was a heavy contingent to get Christian McCaffrey out of that situation in Carolina. He ended up in a situation where he's still a stud. And he should be the number 1 pick in those drafts. And yeah, I might be breaking some news here, but he's probably going to be the number 1 pick that I take this weekend with that number 1 pick. But that said, I think Jonathan Taylor, he could, almost restart his career as he was consensus number 1 pick last year, didn't really fall to that value at all. In the case that he does move franchises, I think that he could somehow work his way back into the first round. But I totally agree with you. I'm not sure that at this very moment, especially it is early, we haven't had any preseason games yet, he's probably a back end second round.
And just quickly, Brett, from a dynasty point of view, you definitely got to hold on to Jonathan Taylor, because nobody's really going to go for him right now. And if they are, it's going to be for lesser value than he completely is worth. Speaking of your pick in redraft and having that late second round pick, the best thing about that is you can then back that up maybe with somebody, a running back, or whether it's an early running back like drafting Christian McCaffrey. You have a backup that can slot in place for Jonathan Taylor in your lineup.
Yeah, I think that would be the only reason to do it. And we talk about strategies and things like that. One of the strategies that a lot of people do is they go wide receiver and running back. I wouldn't suggest doing that with Jonathan Taylor as your only running back this year, just because there's so much uncertainty. And yeah, he could get traded, but he could also hold out. And at this point, we really don't know what's going to happen. Jim Irsay said he's not going to trade him, but we do know that Chris Ballard, the general manager, he's going to do right by the player. He's always said that. He will do right by the player. And he's also been a guy who over the years has tried to just pay his best players. And he's also spoken very highly that he doesn't really care about position. He'll pay his best players. So kind of, stepped on his GM's toes there, Jim Irsay. But at the same time, I'm curious to see how this entire thing comes to a conclusion, whether it's in the next 2 weeks or leaks into the season.
Yeah, definitely. Very interested to see what happens. But Brett, we got a ton of other news.
Yeah, so we're gonna jump over to another one, and it's another first round pick, Cooper Kupp. And last night he left practice with a hamstring injury. MRI came back this morning. Thankfully, came back okay. And Sean McVay saying he'll be back for scrimmages in a few weeks. What does this do to his value, and how does this affect any other Rams receivers?
So this is a weird one because obviously I'm looking at Cooper Kupp and right now he ranks in ESPN's rankings, he ranks second among wide receivers, right behind Justin Jefferson, third overall. That's ahead of Christian McCaffrey. So I mean that's I would say that's the ceiling for Cooper Kupp, this season. Like he can be so dominant. The one thing I'm worried about is look at the Rams this year and look at their roster. It's not great. Look who they have behind Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Van Jefferson. I mean, Tyler Higbee's another pass catcher. That's about it. There's really not much there. So the one thing I'll say about the Rams is they are so bad that they are so close to maybe heading into a rebuild. And the biggest thing about that is why would they take a risk on getting a guy like Cooper Kupp injured or risking his health? I mean, this guy he's 30 years old, but he still has a lot more time. You would have to say 5, 6 years, 7 years left in the NFL. Like if he's healthy, he can definitely be a dominant player. I don't know if the Rams this year, after seeing Cooper Kupp so early, maybe having a bit of a scare, I don't know if they're going to give him that full workload versus some of the other wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. As long as Tua Tagovailoa is healthy, Tyreek Hill, I'd probably put him next to Tyreek Hill. I think you could say maybe that's a little low with Hill ranked at number 8 right now going in drafts. But I do think that there is a risk by taking Cooper Kupp this year versus some of the other receivers in Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, where you would hope that they're healthy. You think they're going to be healthy. And when they are healthy, they are going to be two of the best wide receivers in all of fantasy.
Yeah, so interesting here. So last year he missed the back half of the back half of the 2022 season with an ankle injury. Not sure if it's the same leg. They wouldn't release that information, and so I'm curious though if it is the same leg. What does that actually mean, and is that a lingering issue? We talked a couple of weeks ago about Julio Jones and how that kind of impacted over the years over year, where it was the foot, then it was the ankle, then it was the entire leg. And so, that's an interesting thing from that perspective. I'm not quite sure that Van Jefferson is going to get this huge bump in value. Puka Nacua, I mean, there's that flyer and they keep talking about him, and I'm not really sure that there's much to it other than, a coach trying to hype up his own guy. I think that the only guy that if Cooper Kupp was bound to miss any time that it'll actually help is Cam Akers. Cam Akers is getting a lot of hype right now from Sean McVay, calling him a 3-down back, that bell cow back he called him. I think that's where you're going to see it go, because I'm not sure how much they're going to be able to throw the ball because of the talent there. That said, I'm not sure that at this point I'm that worried about Cooper Kupp until we get to preseason games. And if he's missing time and all of that, obviously, like, you're not going to roll him out there for the whole preseason. You might not roll him out there for any preseason. If he's back in practice, though, things like that, I think that's what you have to keep an eye on. Right now, though, I'd say he's a back-end first rounder, probably like that 6th or 7th pick. And I'm not sure that he's going to drop that much. I'm not really dropping my value in Cooper Kupp from a redraft perspective. And from a dynasty perspective, I think, again, just kind of keep your eye on it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I had probably Cooper Kupp behind Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase at the beginning. I didn't completely see how Cooper Kupp in such a bad team would get as much fantasy value, more fantasy value, and more fantasy points than Jamar Chase in this upcoming season. I do think Cooper Kupp drops below Ja'Marr Chase now. And like I said, a little bit closer to Hill, 8-9 range, maybe 7 if you're feeling pretty good about Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, yeah, it was a scary couple days with the Joe Burrow injury, as we're going to get to him in a little bit, and what might have meant for Ja'Marr Chase and his value. But it was scary times for both Ja'Marr Chase and Cooper Kupp. I still think that it goes Chase and then Kupp in that order, and I don't know that really changes.
Yeah, definitely agree.
All right, so now we jump into the Seahawks, and it was trouble over there as well from the injury perspective. Head coach Pete Carroll saying that Kenneth Walker could be out a while with a groin injury. And then Carroll went on to say that rookie Zach Charbonnet was out indefinitely with a shoulder injury. So now, with this situation here, I take it all with a grain of salt. Pete Carroll has never, ever told the truth completely on injuries. We've seen it all the time with Rashad Penny with that injury, and he's going to be fine, or he's immediately like fractured his fibia, and so he's done for the year. We've seen him kind of pull the cloth over the eyes of the reporters a lot. Jamal Adams, he's going to be fine. That quote sticks out to me, and then of course the next week he's shut down for the season. So for me, I'm not quite sure what to make of the injuries. The out a while thing could be a week. We are not sure what that means in Pete Carroll speak. Out indefinitely, same thing. Not really sure what it means. Personally, I think that Charbonnet really was he didn't really practice from the get-go in full speed. And so it might have been an injury that they're kind of trying to work him back from, maybe from OTAs or training or something like that with the shoulder. The groin injury is the one that really scares me with Kenneth Walker, though.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Kenneth Walker is week to week. They ruled it as Zach Charbonnet is out indefinitely. So we have no time frame at all on Zach Charbonnet, how long it's going to be. Ken Walker, week to week, you would think he's back by week 1. We're 6 weeks away. He should be back by week 1. In that case, that Ken Walker is healthy and Zach Charbonnet still somehow is out, I'd probably right now Ken Walker's ranked as 23rd among running backs. I would say he's maybe in the top 15. Definitely. The questions going into this season was, Ken Walker's really good. However, they used a high pick on Zach Charbonnet, so we're not going to get the full Kenneth Walker. Now you look at Zach Charbonnet, if he's out, then, I mean, it's Kenneth Walker's backfield. Yeah, we always get that one guy who comes in and bothers stuff. I mean, add DJ Dallas maybe to the list of late round flyers if you're feeling like it, and you get some news coming up about Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. But, I mean, right now, I was staying away from Kenneth Walker, especially in early drafts like coming up this weekend. I'm probably staying away from Kenneth Walker just because I'm worried that he won't be getting that same production as the other running backs that he's right next to when it comes to drafts. Zach Charbonnet is a guy that you take a chance on in later rounds. That's where he's going, and it's not going to mean anything to burn a pick like that. I feel like Kenneth Walker, you may be burning the chance to get another really talented running back with a high pick on Kenneth Walker. I think, like I said, I would still take Charbonnet in the later rounds, even though we're still questionable on the injuries. And this is a weird situation, like you said, because Pete Carroll never gives like 100% correct news. We don't know at this point, and you kind of just have to wait and see. You can take a shot on either one, though.
Yeah, and it's that little smile that he made while he was sharing the news, where he was almost like giddy to give the news to the media that both of these guys are down. That said, I'm going to go forward with Zach Charbonnet here. If I had to pick one right now, just based alone on the value, like you said, I think back to like the Dalvin Cook days where Dalvin was wearing that big shoulder brace, but he was still able to put up those big numbers. I don't know that you could do that with a groin injury, and that becomes a little harder to play running back. That said, I mean, whichever one, if one of these guys is hurt and the other one's not hurt, I mean, they're going to be a workhorse back, plain and simple. their value is going to be there. So I do agree with you taking a chance on Charbonnet in that like 8th, 9th, 10th round where he's going. I think that makes it more worth it than picking Kenneth Walker really, really early.
Yeah, and it's a tough spot right now, and I could see people with Charbonnet being out indefinitely. I could see people and Walker only being week to week. People taking a shot on Walker and being like, "Oh well, Charbonnet's out indefinitely, so we don't know what that means," and Walker may be back soon. I can see that happening. I won't be one of those people falling into that trap.
Yeah, nor will I. Nor will I can only see my team potentially taking Charbonnet late if we need some running backs, something like that. Yeah, I'll be sitting this year out on Kenneth Walker that early in the draft.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so now we jump over to the next one, and it is Joe Burrow, and we saw that scary looking play. He comes up limping, goes immediately down. Everybody was speculating, is it an ACL tear, or did he hurt his Achilles? It is a calf strain injury, and he is okay. He's expected to be back week 1, but he will miss most, if not all, of training camp. For me, I'm not sure this really has that much of an effect, other than thank God he avoided that major injury. But I'm not really sure that this has much effect for me in terms of redraft.
Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't really have an effect for me either. I would say this was the best case scenario, you would have to say, for Joe Burrow, just getting that calf strain. Yes, he may be out a week or two in the regular season. They may have to push him back because they know the goal at the end of the season is to win a Super Bowl. They want to play 20 weeks this season, not just the 17 or 18 and 17 in the regular season, excuse me. Joe Burrow will be there throughout the season, so you definitely would want to draft him. At this moment in time, if you want to put Lamar or Justin Fields or Justin Herbert, those guys in that second tier of quarterbacks, if you want to put one of them or two of them ahead of them, I can't really argue with it because right now drafting, there's still the question mark of Burrow. But what I can say, he was quarterback 4 last season and not a ton of rushing value and still made it into the top 5. He's got an elite receiving core that every single one of them is still there. I think, like I said, he should be the 4th or 5th quarterback still off the board in redrafts, excuse me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it goes for, listen, Jonathan Taylor, Cooper Kupp, the 2 running backs in Seattle. If somebody in your league is panicking, especially in a dynasty league, if somebody's panicking, go grab those guys. I mean, Jonathan Taylor's 24. Joe Burrow is super young. I think that those are the kind of situations where you find a lot of the owners of those players panicking and putting themselves into panic mode. That's kind of where you want to take advantage. But as far as redraft goes, I'm not sure that this has really any effect.
Yeah, I actually in my draft this weekend, I really I was impressed by one of my co-owners because he actually had Jamar Chase, and then in the 6th round, Joe Burrow is still available because people are worried about the injury, and now you get Joe Burrow, who could be in the top 3 of quarterbacks this year, no doubt about it, and you're really set up for a really good season with that stack with Chase and Burrow.
Yeah, that's a good tip, and I know that you're going to speak a little bit more about that in just a little bit. All right, so now we go to the big free agent news of the NFL, and it's Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook visited with the Jets. It was kind of weird. They walked him around at practice. The fans were chanting his name. The Hard Knocks cameras followed him for his entire visit, and I'm sure we'll see that a little bit next week. But he left there without a contract. And, he talked about how of course, he was on NFL Live on Saturday. He was on Good Morning Football on NFL Network on Friday. And he spoke about how there's a pretty high chance that he ends up signing there. But there's still that little inkling of the Miami Dolphins. And he's from Miami. They're still lurking in the weeds. And, we're not really sure where the contract talks are. And we spoke, of course, about the Miami value last week. If he goes to the Jets, and we're going to get to Breece in a little bit, but what does this do to Dalvin Cook's value? He's right now projected an 8th round pick in a lot of these drafts.
Yeah, so if you're drafting in early August like we are, I mean, you could get him in the 8th or ninth round. Like that's very good value for the potential that Dalvin Cook can have on a team like the Jets that they may not want to rush back a guy like Brees Hall who's coming off an ACL. They're able to get a guy in like Dalvin Cook and not force Brees Hall into 18 to 20 carries right away. They will take that 10 times out of 10. They don't want to risk the health of Brees Hall for the rest of his career. And getting a guy like Dalvin Cook, an experienced back who's been around the block for a while now, he is definitely a guy that will probably be the number one on the New York Jets this season. And I know the talent that Brees Hall brings, you could say maybe once they get to middle of the season, you could maybe go back and forth on who's going to be the number one. They'll probably have a 1A, 1B, I would think, once Brees Hall gets healthy again. But it's either going to be the Jets or Miami. I think in Miami, it's very crowded right now. So I know Mike McDaniel will most likely have a bunch of different backs doing a bunch of different things. We don't know if Dalvin Cook, obviously, he's going to be the number one guy, but I don't know if his fantasy value is something that you want to get after with three other running backs around him. The Jets, it would be 1A, 1B, like I said, and I think it would put him just inside the top 20 if he went to New York. I think that's probably a good spot for him. I don't think he's going to be in the top 10 like he was all those years in Minnesota because, like I said, I think Brees Hall is going to come back and they're going to get him going as well midway through the season.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's more of like an Alexander Madison situation that he had. This is going to be one of those situations where they're starting to work Brees back, and they'll give him more carries each week as they go along into the season. Yeah, I think that bringing in Dalvin Cook, it might not be a good fantasy football move for us, but at the same time, it'll be a good NFL move. I think that, again, Dalvin will be that number one guy. And so, yeah, to be able to get him in the 8th round where he's going, I think that makes it good value. And at that spot, that's where you win your league, if you make good picks there. So, yeah, it is a guy that you probably would take a chance on, especially if Brees is not ready to go. And let's just kind of get into that now. Brees, he's, on the PUP list right now. And, Garrett Wilson, he also was hurt. He had a low ankle sprain. Saleh said he had a good workout on Tuesday. He's expected to be back at practice on Saturday when they return from Canton from the Hall of Fame game. But as far as Brees goes, let's start with Brees. He's on the PUP list. What's his outlook with Cook and what's his outlook without Cook? Right now, it seems that he is going to be ready week 1, they keep saying. But at the same time, like he's going at the back end of the 2nd round in a lot of these drafts.
Yeah, and I spoke about Brees in our overvalues episode. I think Brees Hall right now in redraft is being way overvalued. Besides the fact that the Jets might sign Dalvin Cook, I think Brees, I don't know if he's getting back to those crazy amount of touches till maybe middle towards the end of the season. They will ease him back if they have Dalvin Cook on their roster. Even if they don't sign Dalvin, like I said, I don't think he gets that 18 to 20 touches per week until the middle of the season. There's no chance I'd be taking him in late 2nd round, middle of the 3rd round. I'm just not interested. I feel like there's guys right there in a ton of great offenses that could also be fringe number 1 running backs and maybe RB2s that definitely have a lot more value than a guy like Brees Hall, who may be stuck behind Dalvin Cook at some point this year, or is trying to nurse back his ACL and may have a setback. Like, you don't know at this moment in time. If an early draft comes up, I definitely think you should take the guys that 100% are going to be there and be on your roster as RB1s, RB2s, like I said.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, for me, I'm not sure how far Brees Hall would fall, even if they did sign Dalvin. I still think that there are a lot of people that are like, he's still a 3rd rounder at the minimum. I don't agree with that. I'm going to be sitting out this year on Brees Hall. It was right up until that Dalvin Cook news that I kind of thought, hey, maybe this guy could be one of those 3rd, 4th rounders. But at this moment in time, he's just going very, very high. I'm not sure that he's going to achieve that. I think when you do draft, you try to draft for value. So if you're drafting a first round pick, you want him to perform like a first round pick. If you're drafting a second round pick, you want him to perform like a second round pick or a first round pick. And so as you start to get in deeper, we talked about Dalvin a second ago. It's an 8th round pick, and you're hoping he performs like a 4th round pick. I don't know that you're getting that value with picking Breece at that spot very high.
Yeah, it's way too early for a guy with so many question marks. I understand like Breece and being that number 10 running back right now, but I would probably, if they sign Dalvin, I said Dalvin's just inside the top 20. I'd put Breece Hall maybe inside the top 25. I think it's kind of around there because it's 1A, 1B. But I think because of the health concerns of Breece Hall, Dalvin would probably get the edge over Breece.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that especially when it comes to like the goal line and things like that, I don't know that they're going to want to put Breece in harm's way. I think that they'll be more comfortable going to Dalvin down low.
Yeah, 100%. And let's get into Garrett Wilson quickly. I'm not worried at all, Brett. I'm not worried at all about Garrett Wilson. This guy is tough as nails, has always been, and is always going to be on the field as long as the doctors say so. And I think going into this year, especially, like, he's got his quarterback. He's got everything he wants. He's in the perfect situation. This guy's not going to just miss games for nothing. I definitely think you should draft him. He's one of the names on the top of my list. Like, draft him. He will be a top 5 wide receiver at the end of the year. There's no doubt in my mind that he's going to build that connection with Aaron Rodgers this year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, he was coming from a quarterback situation that was ruffled up and a bunch of different guys over last season, and he still proved that he could be an elite receiver, and now he has the guy. So I agree with you. I think that he is worth that. Right now he's going in the mid-second round. I think that he's worth it there. Mid to late second round, totally worth it at that spot. I don't really think that the injury is going to be too much of a thing. Again, Robert Saleh said he had a good workout yesterday. He's expected back at practice on Saturday. It was one of those plays where he made a crazy catch and turned while he was catching the ball. And so, kind of hurt the ankle. But at the same time, I think that it's not going to be that much of a deal.
Yeah, if more news comes out, obviously, then you could switch your stance. But right now, he definitely should be mid to late second round, like you said.
Yeah, and we'll be tracking that one over the next couple of weeks as we get closer to the NFL season. So now we jump over to a guy who is coming back from injury. It's Javonte Williams. And Zach, we've spoken about him a lot from a dynasty perspective of what it would mean if he does come back. He's practicing in full. And, for that reason, I think that he could end up being one of those sleepers just based on his redraft value right now.
I was going to say, Javonte Williams, if he goes where he's going right now, could be the steal of the draft easily. There's another guy you can get really great value if you draft in early August. I would assume once experts start to see him going and going in practice and playing a lot and getting those reps in, they're going to move him up their boards. And a lot of people are going to start to draft him a lot earlier. But he's going in the 8th round right now. The 8th round. He could be the RB1 easily. And we saw this guy when he's healthy, he can do a ton of different things. They're going to ride him. Of course, Sean Payton coming in as the head coach, coached Alvin Kamara a couple of years ago. Same kind of back, that receiving back that can also, obviously, Javonte a little bit thicker than Alvin Kamara and can go between the tackles as well. So that's a bonus for Sean Payton if he could get Javonte Williams back. Jump on him. If you could get him in the 8th round, absolutely grab him.
Yeah, he's running back 28, 77th overall right now in the ESPN rankings. I think that that's an absolute steal for a guy that has both the rushing ability and the pass catching ability, especially in those PPR leagues. I think that they're going to utilize it a lot. And, right now the value is pretty high on Samaje Perine. I think that if Javonte's full go, I think that, sky's the limit for him, and that'll obviously be a dip on Perine's value.
Yeah, I agree with you. And people are saying, okay, well, I'm going to draft Perine. They don't know the situation with Javonte. I'm a dynasty owner of Javonte, and I'm like, all right, well, if he's healthy and you're getting him going, all right, I'll take him. Why not?
Yeah, and it's weird because I'm seeing Perine's going like only a round or two later for a lot of the cases. I'm not really sure that it's going to end up that way. And we spoke actually, we didn't really talk about this before, but it kind of just came out. Alvin Kamara is expected to be suspended at least for a couple games, and we're not sure of that. And obviously, he met today with Commissioner Roger Goodell, so that I'm sure will come out pretty soon. But he's going right around where Jamal Williams is going, only a couple rounds, and it's the same situation where that one I would obviously take the later one. With Jamal Williams a couple rounds later, especially just based on the situation and if Kamara does miss time, what does that actually mean for the offense, especially if Jamal Williams kind of gets himself rolling the first couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, once we get some more clarity on it, I'll probably take a stance on it and maybe jump on Kamara if the suspension's not too long.
Yeah, an interesting situation for sure. As we continue through the Denver Broncos, Tim Patrick, he's done for the year with a torn Achilles. He tore his Achilles in practice. Scary video there. And then it was KJ Hamler who came out on his Instagram. He was diagnosed with pericarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart. He was waived by the team with the door open that he returned to the Broncos or he returns to the NFL for another team. Zach, what does this mean for the receiver situation out in Denver?
Yeah, just scary news and sad news for Tim Patrick, who's coming off of a torn ACL. To tear his Achilles right away, right in the start of training camp. It's very disappointing, and hopefully he gets better for next year. And KJ Hamler, the same as well. Also scary news, and hopefully he gets back to playing football in the next couple of years. But, I mean, when it comes to fantasy, there wasn't a ton of redraft value there for the guys in Denver behind Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton because it was kind of a mix. Maybe Courtland Sutton is that number 2 guy, you would have to say, ahead of the other 3, Patrick, Hamler, and now rookie Marvin Mims. I think Mims, you can maybe take a late round flyer now because you have some clarity that he's most likely going to be the number 3 guy. But I don't think he's going to do a lot in redraft this year. Just very young, still has a lot to learn, and it's kind of a project for Marvin Mims, I feel like, in Denver. The other thing I'll say now for Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton, I think this is a boost in targets with not a lot of wide receivers behind them. More so Jeudy than Sutton because I think Judy's the clear number 1. But I feel like some of those targets that were going to go to Jeudy that are going to go to Jeudy now were from guys like Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler. I think Judy's in for a big year. I said that a couple of times. Draft him this year. Not very high on Courtland Sutton. If you could get him in a later round, maybe take a shot on him because he is, like I said, now the wide receiver 2.
Yeah, Jerry Jeudy right now, he is ranked 44th overall, which puts him at wide receiver 19 on the ESPN ranking. Sutton, he is wide receiver 36 at 81 overall. And then Mims is at 198. And I think that might be a late round flyer that you could take in the last round of your draft if somebody else doesn't take him. Could be a guy to look at, especially if nobody takes him in your draft. Keep an eye on him on the waiver wire, especially if he goes off week 1 or week 2. That said, I think that, like you said, this is more targets for Jeudy and for Sutton. I'm not sure how much more, but it'll at least boost their value to a point where you could at least feel comfortable taking them at value rather than below value or above value. I wouldn't really reach on those 2 guys because of this news, but at the same time, I think that you'd feel comfortable if you got Jerry Jeudy in the 5th round.
Yeah, and teams are getting Jeudy as wide receiver 2. If you get Jerry Jeudy like late or low, he's probably a mid-tier wide receiver 2, I think, heading into this year, just because. I mean, Courtland Sutton, I feel like there's a big drop-off between Jeudy and Sutton heading into this year. And if you could get him as your wide receiver 2, maybe even your flex guy, like you're in a really good spot. I think Judy's in for a big year with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I think that, again, we've spoken about Russ, and he can't really get any lower than what he was, and I think that this is going to be one of those bounce back years for him, especially with the coaching and all of that. Obviously his coach made a lot of noise this week, so there's a bit of a target on that team's back. But as far as Russ goes, I think this is a bounce back year for him, and I think Jerry Jeudy's really going to take a step forward as well, where he really hasn't taken that leap in his career.
Yeah, 100% agree.
All right, so now we jump into another interesting team. It's the New England Patriots, and they seem to be comfortable with trying to get Ramondre Stevenson a running partner. Ezekiel Elliott, the latest man to visit the facility in Foxborough. Zach, what would this do to Ramondre's value? And, if any of these guys come in, and obviously what would it do to a guy like Zeke? If Zeke comes in, what's his value?
See, it's weird though, because I feel like some of these acquisitions, and we've had a couple of these, and I've brought them up. Maybe a guy like Devin Singletary. I feel like Zeke coming in is just like one of those annoying guys that's going to take the value away from a running back. If they weren't there, then one of these running backs would be top 15. Every single week, they'd be getting all the touches. I feel like Zeke going to the Patriots, he's nothing more than a bench guy, I think, in fantasy. I understand the touchdowns that he could get, but I don't think it's going to be anything close to something like Jamal Williams did for Detroit last year. I don't think it's going to be nearly that. I still think Ramondre is going to get some of those touchdowns, unlike DeAndre Swift didn't get really any of them, and Jamal Williams got basically all of them. I think this acquisition, if it goes through, it just tarnishes a little bit of Ramondre's value. He's running back 13 right now. I'd probably put him between running back 20 and 23. I think probably drop of 10 spots, and maybe that's a little bit big, but I feel like if you can get some of those other running backs, I feel like I'd take, for example, a guy like James Conner, who's maybe running back 17 right now. I would 100% take James Conner over Ramondre Stevenson if I knew that Zeke Elliott was coming in and was going to take some of those touches away. I feel like right inside those 20s would be the spot for Ramondre. It's weird going into a draft this week because he might be a guy that you want to avoid, or that somebody's going to jump on him. If he drops to you, then 100% you can jump on him. He could be your third running back. Take him 100%. But I feel like where he's going right now, there's going to be people that are jumping on him. I won't be one of those people.
Yeah, I think that I'm with you, especially because not only did they host Zeke, they also brought in Leonard Fournette. They also brought in Darrell Henderson last week. And so to me, there will be some sort of signing in Foxborough with the Patriots. And that to me says, don't take Ramondre at value. Again, if he falls, I agree with you. If he falls, then yeah, you take him because that's a value pick if you can get him lower. But right now, I wouldn't take him as one of those top 15 backs that some of these people were having him at. I wouldn't do that. That said, I was just going to say that if Zeke comes in, if it's Zeke specifically, I think that. Yeah, it won't be like Jamal Williams, but he is going to eat into a lot of those goal line carries. And I think that is where Ramondre's value is going to get hurt.
Yeah, and the thing about Ramondre, the one thing I was going to say was I feel like any of the running backs that come in, I still think Ramondre is going to be the number one. Even if a guy like Leonard Fournette comes in who's a Super Bowl champion, has been there, done that, I don't think he takes the job away from Ramondre. I feel like Ramondre is still the number one, and I'm still ranking him just inside the top 25, I would say. And he would get that value, just wouldn't take him in the top 15 where he's going right now.
Completely agree. Now let's jump into our last piece of news. It's that Sony Michel decided that he is going to retire, and the Los Angeles Rams go out and they sign Donta Foreman. Is there any fantasy effect here other than maybe a boost for Cam Akers?
So this is a weird one for me because Sony Michel was not on a team. Then he came in and signed with the Rams, and then he retired. So he's like, all right, well, he's came in, I think it was a week before he retired. So we're like, okay, well, Sony Michel is going to be the backup. Never mind. He's retiring. I feel like it goes back to normal now with Kyren Williams and Zach Evans both being the backups. I think there might be a battle there. Who knows what it's going to be? I don't know if it's going to be now a boost for Cam Akers. I think he can be the number one, 100%. I'm not sure this year if Cam Akers is going to be a full go workhorse. I there's something holding me back. Maybe it's just where rankings are, and because this guy's outside the top 20, he's running back 22. He's hanging around there with other running backs that we talk about. Oh, they may have a guy behind them that affects their ability to put up a ton of fantasy points. That may be pushing me back. I feel like running back 22 is probably a good spot for Cam Akers. I don't know if this Sony Michel news affects him. I think it just proves that Kyren Williams and Zach Evans will have a battle to be the backup.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm not sure that it's – I mean, again, McVay has been out there, basically the PR spin of Cam Akers in the last year where he left the team. He was disagreeing with the coach. Now the coach is kind of repaying him in compliments through the media. And I think that that's kind of just where it is. But that said, I do think this will be an improvement this year for Cam Akers because he kind of knows his role where last year he really didn't know his role. That said, I'm not sure that it's going to push it up that much higher because Sony Michel retired. I agree with you on the Zach Evans, battle for the backup and whether he can become the backup.
Yeah, and like I said, I think running back 22 because there's still some question marks. We don't know. Cooper Kupp, I talked about it earlier. We don't know what the Rams offense is going to be. They could go into full rebuild mode and call it a day kind of deal. If Cooper Kupp goes down, they may just shut things down and then just rely on the run game. That would mean multiple running backs, whether it was Evans, Williams, or Akers.
All right, so we finally went through all the news. This was a very, very heavy news week. I'm sure that we won't have the next couple of weeks be that heavy in news. Let's head into some redraft tips. And Zach, you got 3 tips here, and then I'll follow up with my 3 tips, and we can kind of discuss each one of them.
Yeah, so I'll start off with my first one, and it's a weird year this year because, there's so many wide receivers. We've seen this in the past, but I feel like with how many wide receivers there is a less amount of running backs. There's a less amount of running backs. My first tip this year, and I'm going to be following it all day long, don't be afraid to reach on a running back this year. I know there's question marks with some of those running backs, but I feel like with how many running backs there are, just there's a little amount. You probably only go to 25 guys that you'd say, okay, I can really rely on this guy each and every week in my lineup. I don't know if guys after that I can completely rely on. They may be fringe in my starting lineup each week. Don't be afraid to reach on those guys. Like I said, unlike wide receivers, it's very hard to find consistently healthy running backs. And if you don't grab them early in drafts, you might be in trouble this year. So grab running backs early. My second tip, I set a goal each and every year, and I've gone by it for the last 5 years or so. Each year, 5 running backs, 5 wide receivers. Grab them. The sooner you complete that goal of 5 running backs, 5 wide receivers, the better shape you'll be in. Take as many running backs and wide receivers as possible to really start your draft. That's where you're going to get the most points. I understand that people look at quarterback and maybe a guy like Travis Kelce at tight end. That's maybe an exception with a guy like Kelce because he's basically a wide receiver. I think taking as many running backs and wide receivers as possible will put you in the best possible spot to win a championship. My third and final tip is you don't need to reach on a QB this year. I understand if Patrick Mahomes is there in the 3rd round, yeah, you might as well jump on him because that's kind of where he's ranked. Third, fourth round, that's around that turn. That's probably where Patrick Mahomes is rated. I don't know if I'd reach on one this year. There's some guys in that second tier that look really good. Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Justin Fields. Like, I'd feel comfortable with every single one of those guys being my starting quarterback this year. What I will say is don't wait too long for a quarterback, and then you'll put yourself in trouble. But if one falls right in the middle, definitely jump on them. I think the same thing with tight end. I am one of those people that really rarely drafts a tight end early. I'd say I'd wait till 6th, 7th, 8th round, and then I'll jump on a tight end. I think I hardly ever reach for a tight end. I think especially this year, you do not need to reach on a tight end. Wait for one to fall to you in the 7th or 8th round, and it should help you grab those running backs and wide receivers like I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, as far as the tight end goes, I mean, we've spoken about it, at length here over the last couple of weeks about how many tight ends are going to be there for you later. And then, of course, there's those sneaky sleepers that are going to be at the very end, and the success that those guys might have. I mean, unless you get the very upper echelon tight end, it's a touchdown dependent position. And so I think that if you're going after those mid-tier tight ends, don't reach. I totally agree with that one. Also really agree with the 5 wide receivers and the 5 running backs. I think it's a really good idea to make sure that those teams are balanced. You don't really run into that issue when your guys hit the bye week. And so I totally believe in that one as well. And, reaching on the running backs, I absolutely agree with that. And it really just boils down to me doing some mock drafts in the last couple of weeks where the running backs kind of dry out and you're kind of left with these guys in the 10th, 11th, 12th round. And you're like, is this guy really going to ever make my lineup? Will this guy ever start for me if there's no injuries? And a lot of the cases that answer is no, that guy won't start for you in your lineup. And so I think that, this year is kind of weird and it's, part of the ever-changing NFL. And we talked about, the contract situations and stuff. They're going running back by committee, a lot of these teams. And so, there's that one guy who's getting more carries. But at the same time, most teams are splitting them up between 2 or 3 or 4 guys. And I think we're really seeing that a lot in fantasy drafts.
Yeah, and just one thing, Brett, I'm in a league that really favors running backs. Shout out to my buddy Sandro and his league. Like, this league, I've never seen anything like it. It's unlike any other. I feel like this year I am the most worried as possible. I have the 10th pick in a 12-team league. I need to get a running back. They might all be gone, the top tier running backs. I'm very worried about it. I'm hoping that I can maybe grab 2 on the 10 and then maybe 14 or 15 turn. Like, I feel like it's going to be very hard this year. You got to reach on running backs because there's just not a lot of them this year.
Yeah, I've seen those leagues and that league specifically, you have the 10th pick. There might be 8 running backs that are taken already. It's one of those leagues where the running backs really just die out. And so I totally get that. And for those leagues where you don't even have that, again, I find myself in that, mid rounds where I'm like, really, I have to pick this guy. And I almost have to draft another receiver because I'm like, I don't make the value doesn't make any sense for me at that point, which kind of leaves you thin at running back. And so make sure you don't fall into that trap. My 3 tips here. The first one, grab those top tier quarterbacks. I absolutely love having the advantage at the top scoring position in fantasy football, and that is the quarterback. Some of these leagues I get poked fun at that, I take the quarterback too early, the Mahomes in the 3rd or the Josh Allen in the 3rd or the 4th. I love having those guys. It's those weeks where you have those 40 spots that you're just like, yeah, I'm going to win this week just based on my quarterback putting up 40 points. And that comes across 4 of your players. 4 of your players combined for 40 points. And it only took my quarterback to get those 40 points. So I love having the quarterback because of those weeks. And quite honestly, it's more fun to have the top echelon quarterbacks, and that's what it's about. It's about enjoying who you get as well. And a lot of those quarterbacks, I mean, at the top, they're playing in those primetime games. We spoke about that, last week or 2 weeks ago, about how much fun it is to, be down 20 points and you're going into Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football with Pat Mahomes, and you're rooting for him to get 20 points. Well, he's probably going to get the 20 points because it's Pat Mahomes. When you get a lower guy on that list, get quarterback 17, 18, he's starting, or even quarterback 11, 12, 13, and you're hoping that he gets 20 points. I think you don't really get that by having the top tier quarterbacks. So get those top tier quarterbacks, and it is okay to reach a little bit to get one. That said, I agree with what you said before. That second tier of quarterback, I'm okay with that this year, especially with that running back, pull. And if you want to prioritize getting running backs and, a couple receivers and then grabbing that second tier quarterback, that Trevor Lawrence, that's okay. I think that this year is kind of the exception to that rule that I always have of grabbing that top tier quarterback. But you'll see me I'm going to take Pat Mahomes this year in the third round because that's, I love having that 40 spot. But I won't fault anybody for waiting and taking that second tier quarterback. I wouldn't wait for the third tier quarterback just based on the fact of, you get those couple weeks where you're putting up 13, 14 points and you're like, what's happening? My receiver is scoring more than my quarterback. And I think that that's what kind of leads me away from that. The second rule I have, ignore the bye weeks unless this is your final tiebreaker between two guys. I think that this is really important, and it just really comes down to building your team with the most possible talent that you can. For me, I will look at the bye week for about half a second before I make a decision. It really doesn't factor in unless, of course, you're noticing week 9 on every single one of your guys. Don't be the guy who picks two quarterbacks with the same bye week, because then you're kind of screwed. But that said, when it comes to receivers and all of that, listen, the last couple of years we had the COVID scheduling and there was bye-mageddon for the last 2 seasons. We don't really have that this year. They kind of spread out the bye weeks. That said, I'm okay with, if your receivers are not there for a week and you have to go to your backups, that's okay. If you go undefeated and you lose 1 week because your guys had a bye, that's okay. There's no buys in the playoffs. That's the other thing. And so therefore, just pick the team with the most talent, pick the players with the most talent, ignore those bye weeks unless it's your absolute final tiebreaker when making a decision between two guys. The second or the third rule and final rule is that the rookies do not equal success. There is one exception this year, and that's Bijan Robinson. He is going to be a monster, and it's unfortunate that I have the first pick and I'm not going to be able to pick Bijan Robinson. But at the same time, I'll be okay with picking a guy like a Christian McCaffrey. That said, the rookies, we love talking about the shiny new toy, and every year, there's that one guy who comes through. Last year it was Garrett Wilson. Just lit it up, and he was a monster. Even Breece Hall was really good. That said, the rookies aren't always that special. There's going to be a lot of people overdrafting JSN this year. I don't necessarily agree with it. He's the third receiver. There's going to be a lot of people that are overdrafting Jordan Addison, saying, oh, he's in a good situation. I'm not sure I agree with it. There's a lot of guys in that spot that he is being taken very high that I would, take instead of him. Dalton Kincaid is being overdrafted, and we haven't even seen him play it down. There's all the rumblings about whether he plays in the slot or whatnot. That's for a dynasty owner. I don't really put a lot of stock into that. Listen, if you want to take a late round flyer on Dalton Kincaid, do it. I think that that's awesome. But don't overdraft. I think that's the big thing. They don't always equal success. And so, yes, it's not equal. It's not always equal to success. Again, the exception here is Bijan, but don't go reaching on those rookies.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And starting off with the rookies, you look at the exception. Bijan is probably going to be this year. Garrett Wilson last year, and even the year before that, Najee Harris was going in the top 10 of drafts and definitely exceeded expectations. He was in the top 5 of running backs that year. There's always that one guy that you're like, okay, well, I feel comfortable taking that. The rest after that, I was in a draft. Somebody took JSN in the 7th round. This guy's going to be the 3rd wide receiver on the Seahawks this year, right? I'm not a huge believer in that. I completely agree that there's only a few rookies that you can really rely on to consistently be in your starting lineup and put up those points each and every year. I agree with you on the second one as well. When it comes to the bye weeks, I talked about this with you yesterday. The one thing is, when I'm drafting first and second rounds, I feel like that's the one exception. When you're sitting there and you draft a guy like Saquon Barkley, and he's week 13, I believe, this year, or around there, and then you're like, oh, well, I'm not going to take Josh Jacobs then. So that's the one thing I would say when it comes to the bye weeks, but completely agree with you. There are no bye weeks in the playoffs. I loved when you said that because you're not wrong, and that's when it's going to matter most. That's going to win you your league if you have the best team going into the playoffs, and it doesn't matter what their bye weeks were during the regular season. And your first one, the top tier quarterbacks, it's always great having the top tier quarterbacks because it's fun having them as well. Just not based on, of course, the points. They're going to be helping you out a lot when it comes to those big time games where you need a certain amount of points going into Monday Night Football, relying on Josh Allen, relying on Jalen Hurts. Don't be afraid to draft them. Like I said, I wouldn't reach on them unless it was. I did it this year. It was Patrick Mahomes. I think that's probably the only guy I would do it for. They'd fall in your lap. If they do fall in your lap, then oh yeah, go for them. Just have a great time having them. Like I said before, feel comfortable though with that second tier. There's a couple of guys in that second tier that I'd be a little bit worried about, but if there's a guy in that second tier that you're feeling really comfortable, go get them and feel comfortable getting one of those guys at quarterback this season.
Yeah, I think that another one that, just briefly, we go back to that rookies and success and we kind of mix it with the quarterback thing. Anthony Richardson, it's a guy that a lot of people are very high on, and a lot of people are almost drafting him as their quarterback one. Don't do that because there's the chance that he really doesn't pan out this year. That, this is one of those transition years where he's learning how to be an NFL quarterback versus a college quarterback. And if he falls on his face, well, then your highest scoring position isn't exactly going to be scoring many points. That's the situation where I would say don't go into it. But when it comes also to the bye weeks and things like that, I said don't look at it. Don't pick 2 quarterbacks with the same bye week. I think that's a pretty obvious one. If you do grab those top tier quarterbacks, though, make sure you look at the schedules of your backups before you pick them. Because if you pick Pat Mahomes, you're playing Pat Mahomes every single week unless he gets hurt. And when he's on a bye in week 10, well, who is Aaron Rodgers playing week 10? Oh, well, he's playing a better opponent than Daniel Jones. I'm just throwing 2 guys out there. But so therefore, I would pick Aaron Rodgers over Daniel Jones, knowing that in week 10, I'm playing him. And then every other week, he's probably on my bench. I do not agree with the whole not picking 2 quarterbacks because you have Pat Mahomes, because in the case that Pat Mahomes does get hurt, your season's in the tank. I always like shoring that up with a backup. It's almost like picking a running back handcuff. That's what I would equate it to. Make sure that you do grab a solid backup. That top tier of backup guys I like to get just so that in the, very slim, cross your fingers case that your top guy gets hurt, you at least have someone that you can fall back on.
Yeah, and I have a great example of that just quickly, Brett, and it happened in this league that I drafted in this past week, and I have Pat Mahomes on my team, but I was thinking about a backup quarterback. I was kind of pushing it off for a while because nobody else was drafting backup quarterbacks. I ended up getting Kirk Cousins in the 14th round, Brett. he dropped that far because nobody prioritized backup quarterbacks at that point. And I got Kirk Cousins to back up Patrick Mahomes. And even if hopefully not, but if Patrick Mahomes goes down this year, I have Kirk Cousins, who's right on the edge of starting quarterbacks. And I feel like the only guy I said to you before, the only guy in that like third tier of quarterbacks that I would feel comfortable, starting is if I had a stack of Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson or something like that, something similar to that. That's the only time I would feel comfortable with it. And in that case, you got to go for that middle tier 2, and maybe even if you're feeling it, tier 1 quarterbacks this year.
Yeah, and just looking at the schedule, Kirk Cousins is playing against the Saints. So I mean, it is a game that listen, that could be a high scoring game. That's one of those high pressure games. And so I think that is a very smart move, especially when you're almost, again, it's that handcuff situation where you're almost, basically putting yourself a safety net in the worst case possible that your top guy goes down. Just like in the running backs, you at least have a fallback option. So that way you don't have to like search the waiver wire and grab the 32nd quarterback in the league because your league decided they were taking a bunch of quarterbacks. I'd especially recommend it if you are in a 2 quarterback or a super flex league to make sure that you at least grab a third quarterback in that same situation. Make sure that you have the buys split, because obviously if you're in a 2 quarterback or a super flex, you don't want to have 2 quarterbacks that are on the same bye week, because obviously then you can't start both of them. You'd only be left with 1 quarterback starting and you'd have to put somebody else in. And so I think it's very, very important when it comes to 2 quarterback super flex leagues. That's probably where I would use it most.
Yeah, I agree with you. And if you are in a super flex or 2 quarterback league, I'm one of those people. I haven't been in one of those leagues yet, but obviously a dynasty super flex, grab those quarterbacks early, maybe first and second round, like get those quarterbacks early because there is just a huge dip from the top tier to the bottom.
Yeah, I have a rule where we did it in our dynasty draft, but I was in a super flex redraft last year, and it was grab 2 quarterbacks within the first 3 rounds. Definitely grab one in the first round. And then depending on what value falls into the second round, either take a quarterback there. If everybody took a quarterback, well, then there's going to be a lot of, non-quarterback position players that are there for you in the second round. And you're kind of living, you're sitting pretty if you're getting Pat Mahomes and then you're getting like Cooper Kupp as your guy.
Yeah, you got to play it by ear, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So, just like we had on our last episode, our next episode, Zach and I have a redraft league draft this weekend. And so next week's episode, we're going to dive into our full 17-round draft, break down some of our picks and what our teams look like. And we will cover the picks we'll cover all of the news that happens in the next week. We're going to also break down the football game from this weekend as the Jets take on the Browns in the Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio. Zach, are you excited for our redraft?
I was going to say, Brett, it's almost here. The words we love to hear, draft day. It's almost here.
Yeah, I feel like I've been on the clock now for a couple of weeks as we got our order. And, it kind of went back and forth. And the debate season of, do you pick that absolute stud wide receiver in Justin Jefferson, or do you go and you take a running back in Christian McCaffrey? And I've gone back and forth on it. Just, briefly, anecdote here. I've kind of gone back and forth on it. I can see it from both sides. I also have watched as the league in the last couple of weeks has changed, and it's about getting those stud running backs, because we just talked about like how the running back by committee and all of that. And so, yeah, I'm going to announce it right now. I mean, I already announced it a couple of minutes ago, but going to take Christian McCaffrey with that first pick. Just because I think that the value of running backs has gone down dramatically, especially with all this contract situation that's going on. And what does that mean for running backs? There's only a handful of teams in the league that are going to roll one running back out for the majority of the snaps. And Christian McCaffrey is that guy right now.
100%. Go grab those running backs. Listen, we got to get the running backs early this year. Don't be afraid to reach on them.
Yeah, I truly believe that every year they talk about how high the value is of running back. This year, I think it's really especially important just because you don't want to be left starting like Zach Moss in your lineup.
100%.
All right. So until next time, Zach, we'll see you next week. Brett Malwood signing off here.